This is 5.7 joint notes. The essential question is, what are the different methods of classifying joints and what are the features of synovial joints? Joints are articulation of bones or where two or more bones are connected. Function of joints are hold bones together and allow for mobility or movement. There are two ways or methods of classifying joints. The first is the functional classification, which means that they are classified according to how much movement there is in a joint. So synarthrosis or synarthroses, which is plural, are joints that have no movement whatsoever. Amphiarthroses are joints that have slight movement or a little bit of movement. And then diarthroses are joints that have unlimited amount of movement. Another method of classifying is classification based on structure or structural classification. That means that it is classified according to the material that the joint is made up of. Fibrous joint is made up of fibrous tissue, which means that it is made up of dense connective tissue or has lots of collagenous fibers. Collagen fibers, remember, are really tough, but they don't stretch very well. So you're going to find little or no movement whatsoever in a fibrous joint. In a cartilaginous joint, it means that the material in the joint has cartilage in it. Cartilage is a lot more flexible than fiber, so there is some slight movement in the joint. Then synovial joints have synovial membrane, which produce synovial fluid, and that means that there is a lot of movement. It is freely movable. Examples of places where you're going to find a fibrous joint is going to be sutures in the skull. Remember, as children or babies, the skull bones are not fused together and they're completely separate bones. And as the child or the baby grows to adulthood, the bones will meet and they will fuse together to become one bone. So what is left of that separation is what we call the suture, and that is a fibrous joint. There is no movement. Syndesmoses is another type of fibrous joint, and it is found between the distal portion of the tibia and fibula here, and in the distal portion of between the radius and the ulna, and those places it is completely filled in with the fibrous tissue, and there is little or no movement. Cartilaginous joints, remember, has cartilage in between, and examples of those would be the intervertebral disc, which is the joint between the two vertebrae, and the pubic symphysis, which is the joint between the two pubic bones. And you can see this clear, thick layer of cartilage in between, so there is slight movement between those joints. Synovial joints are the most common type of joints, and you're going to find it all over the body where you have lots and lots of movement. Certain features of synovial joints, you recall that in the ends of bones are material called articular cartilage made up of hyaline cartilage, and their job is to cover the bones where it's going to come in contact with another bone. Joint surfaces are covered or surrounded by something called a fibrous articular capsule, which encloses the joints together to create a joint cavity. And that joint cavity is filled with synovial fluid, which is made by the synovial membrane. And then surrounding the joint capsule is the ligament that basically gives the joint support and rigidity so that it's not being dislocated. So when joints get injured and the ligaments tear around the joint or the joint capsule is torn, then the synovial fluid can leak out, which means now the articular cartilage of the two bones are meeting and eventually they can wear down, and then the bones will eventually wear down, which will basically destroy the joint. Another structure found in synovial joints is called the bursa. Bursa literally means a sac, and it's filled with a fluid. It lines the synovial membrane, and it is an extra protection or a cushion on the joints for protection. Okay, so they can be found anywhere along the outside the joint capsule, underneath the ligament, to give it an extra cushion for the joints for protection. Sometimes injuries to the joint could cause some kind of condition called the bursitis, which means now the bursa has taken damage and it could actually cause the bursa to become swollen or damaged, and it becomes inflamed. So the first thing you're going to notice in a joint is the hyaline cartilage covering the ends of the bone where the bones are going to actually touch. Those are going to be called the articular cartilage. Then a fibrous capsule in the red is going to completely surround the two bones together to form this space inside it called the joint cavity. And that space is not empty, it is filled with synovial fluid. Synovial fluid is created by synovial membrane, which lines the inner covering of the joint capsule. The joint capsule is reinforced with a layer of ligament. And just outside the ligament, outside the joint capsule, would be an extra cushion called the bursa. 5.7 notes homework is: number 1, give the 3 functional classification of joints and give examples of each. Number 2, give the 3 structural classification of joints and give examples of each. Number 3 is what structures make up a synovial joint.